19 thin rings painted on a gun barrel. Not carved into armor, not stamped into steel, just brushstrokes. Counting kills on a vehicle that, on paper, should not have lived long enough to earn even half of them. Because this isn't a Tiger. It isn't even a proper tank destroyer in the later, enclosed German style. It's a Marder II, basically a Panzer II chassis with a full-size anti-tank gun bolted on top, a tall silhouette, and an open fighting compartment that leaves the crew exposed to the one thing the Eastern Front always has plenty of: fragments. And yet, in 1943, there it is, the Marder II Kohlenklau, the cartoon figure painted on the side like a signature. The nickname itself comes from a wartime propaganda caricature, Kohlenklau, the coal thief, a character used to shame wasting fuel and energy, now turned into a kind of unit mascot on the battlefield. So here's the question that makes this whole story work. How do you become an ace in an open-topped box? How does a crew survive long enough? Thin armor, open roof, no turret, to rack up claims. And what does survive even mean when every day is a gamble against artillery, air attack, and the first enemy tank crew that spots your muzzle flash? Because the Marder exists for one reason: urgency. In 1941, German anti-tank firepower is suddenly behind the curve. The shock of encountering better protected Soviet tanks drives a rush for anything that can kill at range right now. The answer is not elegant. The answer is practical. Take what you already have, strip it down, and mount a gun powerful enough to punch through the front of enemy armor before it can punch back. That's why the Marder II looks like a compromise you can see from a kilometer away. On the SdKfz 131 version, the one most people think of, the main weapon is the 75mm Pak-40, a gun that gives the vehicle real reach. But everything around that gun is a compromise. The fighting compartment is open at the top and rear, the vehicle stands tall on the horizon, and its armor is limited, good enough to shrug off small arms in some angles, but not built to absorb punishment or cover mistakes. That compromise forces a doctrine. A Marder crew doesn't brawl. It doesn't trade shots at close range. It does not go looking for fights in towns or forests where infantry can get close. You don't crest a ridge like a tank and hope your armor holds. You fight like a hunter with a long rifle. Pick your ground, fire first from concealment, and move before the return fire arrives, because protection is thin and time is shorter than you think. So if you want to understand a Marder ace, don't start with the kill rings. Start with the habits that kept the crew alive long enough to paint them. The first habit is distance. A Marder wants long sight lines, open fields, gentle slopes, the edge of a village, not inside it. You're looking for the kind of ground where your Pak-40 can speak first. And first isn't a slogan here, it's physics. If you fire first, you might disable the enemy tank before it can answer. If you fire second, you might never fire again. The second habit is preparation. This isn't just drive to a bush and wait. A good position has an exit route that isn't obvious. It has a second position pre-picked. It has camouflage that breaks up the silhouette and hides the gun shield. It has a line of communication to whoever is spotting, because in a Marder, spotting is life. And that brings us to the third habit, teamwork. A Marder II crew is small, and every second matters. The gun must be laid quickly. Ammunition is limited. The vehicle has restricted traverse compared to a turreted tank, so the driver and commander have to help aim the hull, as much as the gunner aims the sights. Even the rhythm of loading becomes part of survival. Load, fire, observe, correct, before the enemy's return shot walks into your position. Then comes the habit that separates survivors from kill ring legends: relocation. After you fire, you announce yourself to the whole battlefield, tank guns, anti-tank guns, and any observer who can call in fire. Open-topped vehicles fear fragments for a simple reason. Fragments don't have to defeat armor. They only have to reach you, and on the Eastern Front, they reach you constantly. So the smartest Marder crews fight like ghosts. Shoot, displace, reappear somewhere else before retaliation lands. The vehicle is not heavily armored, but it is mobile enough to do this if the crew stays disciplined. That's the paradox. The same thin protection that makes the Marder fragile also forces it into a style of fighting that, when executed correctly, can be brutally effective. Now, when you look back at Kulka and those 19 rings, you're not just looking at marksmanship. You're looking at a crew that understood the rulebook of survival and followed it obsessively. But to make the ace theme real, we need names, because the German army did produce tank destroyer high scorers, and Panzerjägerabteilung 561 is one of the units where these stories cluster. Let's start with Unteroffizier Richard Rambo. Rambo was a gun leader in Panzerjägerabteilung 561, and he's credited with a dramatic moment during the fighting around Rzeów, destroying 9 enemy tanks in a single battle action and raising his total claimed kills to 29, an achievement that led to the award of the Knight's Cross on September 19, 1942. The important thing isn't just that number, it's what that number implies about how he fought. 9 tanks doesn't happen because you drove forward and got lucky. It happens because you were in the right place with the right lane of fire at the right time, then kept your head when the return fire started searching for you. Imagine what that kind of action looks like. A Soviet armored thrust is funneled into a corridor, a road, a gap between woods, a low rise where vehicles must crest and briefly expose themselves. A Marder crew like Rambo's doesn't chase the column. It lets the column enter the trap, then starts breaking it apart. The first shot is everything. If the first tank is hit and blocks movement, you create hesitation. Hesitation creates clustering. Clustering creates targets that stop maneuvering and start looking for you. And while they look, you fire again, then again, always aware that the moment they identify your position, your time in that spot is over. That is what a Marder ace really is. Not a duelist, but an ambush professional. Now to the man tied to the image we opened with, Unteroffizier Helmut Kulka. Kulka served as a gun commander in 3rd Company, Panzerjägerabteilung 561, and he received the German Cross in Gold on October 16, 1942, while holding that role. The exact sequence of his engagements can't be rebuilt shot for shot, so we ground the story in what is firm: his unit, his role as a gun commander, his award record, and the photographed Kulka Marder with its kill rings, then use those anchors to recreate what a day at the front likely felt like. Because if you are a gun commander in an open-topped Marder on the Eastern Front, life runs in extremes. Long stretches of tense waiting, staring through optics, scanning tree lines, listening for engines. Then, seconds of violence. The gun barks, the vehicle rocks, spent casings slam. The loader's hands move by muscle memory. The commander calls corrections. The driver inches the hull to keep the target in traverse. And over all of it, the most feared sound isn't a tank gun. It's the distant thump that means artillery has found your grid square, because an open compartment turns near misses into casualties. You can even bring it back to the photo. Kulka is described as standing with pride, wearing the headset Kopfhörer on his ears. That detail matters because it hints at the job. He's not just a shooter, he's a coordinator tied into the net, receiving and passing information that keeps the Marder where it needs to be, close enough to kill, far enough to live. Now, let's be clear about kill rings and claims, because this is where arguments usually start. Those rings are the story a crew chose to paint on its gun. They might represent confirmed knockouts, probable kills, shared engagements, or kills credited at unit level. Counting methods varied, and wartime record-keeping was rarely precise. The safest and most honest phrasing is simple. The barrel shows 19 claimed kills. And that's the real hook. Even if the number is imperfect, the fact that the crew felt justified painting it on tells you how dangerous and how proud they believed their work to be. So what made the Marder II effective enough for this kind of kill ring culture to exist? First, the gun. The Pak-40 isn't a symbolic weapon. It's a real tank killer, mounted on a chassis that could actually reach a firing position without being dragged into place by a tractor under fire. The whole Marder concept is mobile anti-tank, not glamorous, but essential. Second, the speed of fielding. The Marder II is the kind of solution you build when you can't afford to wait for perfect. Production and conversion start in 1942, and the design evolves through practical necessity, new builds on Panzer II Model F hulls, and later conversions from older Panzer II chassis as long as any were available to turn into something useful. Third, Doctrine by force. Because it's open-topped and thinly armored, it pushes crews into the correct tactical behavior: range, concealment, first-shot accuracy, and rapid displacement. The vehicle's weaknesses punish bad decisions immediately. The few who learn the rules become terrifyingly competent. But of course, there are cons, and you should lean into them because they're the soul of the story. The Marder II is tall, which makes concealment harder. The fighting compartment is open, which makes weather miserable and artillery fragments deadly. Ammunition stowage is limited compared to a tank. And because this is essentially a gun platform, it is not a vehicle you want to be caught alone at close range. So why did Germany keep fielding Marders and vehicles like them so late into the war? Because war production is not a wish list, it's a bottleneck. Germany needed mobile anti-tank firepower in huge numbers immediately and again while factories were already committed, while designs were competing for priority, while retooling and pauses were luxuries a desperate army could not afford. A U.S. Army Command and General Staff College thesis on Germany's anti-tank procurement problem captures the logic bluntly. By 1943, production had to continue unabated, there was no room for delay, and major capacity was tied up in Panther and Tiger programs, meaning there simply weren't spare chassis and industrial slack lying around to solve every problem with brand new, ideal vehicles. That's the environment where stopgaps live far longer than anyone intended. Enclosed tank destroyers like the Jagdpanzer IV and later vehicles do arrive, and they're clearly safer for crews. But the front never stops needing anti-tank guns that can move with the line, and you fight with what you can build and supply at scale. In that reality, the Marder's ugliness is its strength. It's achievable. When you return to Kohlenklau, don't treat the rings as the point. They sit on a vehicle built around trade-offs: strong gun, weak protection, high-profile, open fighting compartment. That's the paradox. The Marder's lethality comes from the weapon. Its survivability comes from how it is used: ambush, first shot, and immediate displacement. A Marder ace wasn't protected by armor. He was protected by habits, distance, discipline, and the relentless instinct to disappear the moment the gun spoke. And if 19 rings are even close to true, then somewhere on the Eastern Front in 1943, one crew proved that in war, survivability isn't always thickness of steel. Sometimes, survivability is simply being gone 1 minute before the fragments arrive.